Hi, my name is Hannah Taddick, and I'm a freshman at Sacred Heart University, and this is my digital story of the changes in my learning that after the first semester have already began to grow and develop. Also, please enjoy this cheesy picture my mom made me take while visiting the campus for the first time. The reader response theory to me is essentially how the reader interprets and takes away from the text, and it requires these three things. The first one is activeness. This is just recording the thoughts you have while reading, and it's important to write down everything. It can be as simple as writing down the way a line made you feel, or another book it reminded you of, or questions that either come from places of confusion or places of curiosity. The purpose of this being to remind yourself of your initial thoughts. A good strategy for this is, if you struggle with it, is after every paragraph, force yourself to try and write a common theme that the author is trying to get across. The next requirement is lenses, and by this I mean looking at the text with different perspectives. We'll get into this one in a little more detail on the next slide. Then finally, the last part is discussion. Discussion is a key element because it is taking everyone's active reading thoughts and comparing them. By doing this, we are able to become active readers, which leads to the key understanding of critical reading and allows us to then move on to critical thinking. Critical reading is essentially going from just reading something to writing down and creating connections. It takes the activeness that I described on the last slide, but to get to a deeper meaning takes a little more effort. It requires the reader to use multiple perspectives when analyzing the work. The best way to do this is to read it multiple times and try and use a different lens or thought process when approaching it. An example of this would be reading a text and specifically questioning, how does this apply to the author in their life? Then using the text to find key points of this relationship. Similar to what we did with Orwell and how knowing he was born in Burma changed the entire meaning of the story. All these aspects together lead to deeper analysis. Therefore, we have achieved critical thinking. Here's an example of how I would do a critical reading example. The quotation is from Douglas's Resurrection and reads, "It was a glorious resurrection, from the tomb of slavery to the heaven of freedom. My long crushed spirit rose, cowardice departed, bold defiance took its place, and I know resolved that, however long I remain a slave in form, the day had passed when I could be a slave in fact." When reading this, there is an obvious deep change occurring in Douglas, and the point that he's trying to get across is that he has reached enlightenment. Now, a literary device is word choice, specifically looking at the word form. The word form gives us a hint of this enlightenment because he's talking about being mentally free, and form applies his acknowledgement that he is still as a slave, but only in a physical sense. Through author background, we know he was born into slavery, which makes his enlightenment even grander, since he came to the realization, even though the only life he's known is through slavery, and makes the reader question what caused this change in his behavior that led him to this point. Through using these multiple lenses, notice how at each analysis we can bring a deeper meaning to the text. For seminar discussion, the purpose is to come in with our own thought, add everyone else's ideas, and then you've reached a new, better understanding. That's essentially the idea of using a Socratic seminar and the thesis plus antithesis equals new thesis or synthesis model. It reiterates this idea of discussion being a collaboration of ideas and opinions that bring new light to the text. So here are some strategies to have a good discussion. Start with the observations, because something you notice, others may have not. Then move into using evidence of the text that support these observations and that you believe have greater meaning. This leads to analysis, which is the first attempt at figuring out what the text is trying to say. This is followed by expression, and this can be of opinions or emotions about the text. It's, well, as you interpret it this way, I saw it as ... Finally, this leads us to make connections either with ourselves or other readings, but the most important connection being, how does this apply to us in the modern world, or why is this relevant? After answering that, you have reached a higher understanding through the collaboration of others. Now for some examples of ways I've strengthened my learning is through digital tools. One example is in reading by using Google Docs to collaborate with others before discussion. This helps myself organize my thoughts that I see as important and gives insight to what my other classmates are thinking and the kinds of questions I should be thinking about before discussion. The other example for an improvement I've made is in presenting. We've used this through Flipgrid, which offers a way to communicate and prep my ideas orally before a discussion and really understand what I took away from the text and how I can compare it to my classmates. Here I've just embedded a Flipgrid video example of me discussing my interpretation of Tell the Truth but Tell It Slant by Dickinson. Then I did a quick slide on things I've noticed that are my weaknesses in learning. The purpose of this exercise was to give greater insight on myself and how I could improve, and if others have this, how they can improve. So quickly I talked about my struggle with being too hard on myself and how everything I have to say or write needs to be perfect, which can sometimes hold me back in group dynamics. And I realized I just need to be more realistic about my expectations I hold on myself and take the pressure off because nothing is perfect the first time. So I made a video for my aha moment, but these are the key things I want you to take out. So my connection was realizing I can make connections. This led to increased strength in liberal arts and science classes through making these connections, and how that gave me more perspectives and deeper meaning in both. So here it is. This is me, and this is the story of how I reached my aha moment. Let's start from the beginning. Okay, maybe this is a little too far back. Let's fast forward a bit. This is me, junior year, and this is the year that I decided that I wanted to become a physical therapist. I started off the year making captain for my club soccer team, but at the beginning of the season, I broke my ankle and I tore some tendons, and I found out the damage would have me out for the rest of my high school career. I was devastated, to say the least, but I knew sitting around feeling sorry for myself wouldn't help the situation either. So I started going to see a physical therapist and immediately fell in love with everything they did. I loved the fast pace and building relationships with people and helping them to reach their goals. So when senior year came around, I started applying to PT programs, and sure enough, I wound up at Sacred Heart. I was so excited to start classes that I actually cared about and wanted to do. But when I got my schedule, I saw a lot of classes that weren't part of my major, but were requirements for the school. So when I started in the fall, I can honestly say I wasn't looking forward to more of these classes that didn't have to do with my major. This led me to my aha moment. Instead of seeing it as a requirement, I approached it as, how can this help me in my future career? And I learned something. The liberal arts classes and my science classes are more related than I thought. I've always had a science mind. Why do things work like this? Why do we do certain things? Why are we the way we are? I realized that these are the same questions that authors ask when developing their own characters, and it's my job as a reader to bring in the explanation. When I took that approach, I was applying and strengthening my science-based knowledge through my writing. This made me realize something. Writing takes creativity, and science takes logic and an analytical approach. They sound like opposites, but there is a need for creativity in the science field. Creativity is what leads to new procedures and treatments that change modern medicine. So while it started out as a requirement, it led to a change that will shape me for the rest of my time as a student and a physical therapist. Then here's just evidence of using that connection in my writing. So I used the psychological approach to explain Orwell's actions of shooting the elephant in regards to mob mentality. Then finally my last slide was just a quick observation on how I have changed through this course and how I have noticed the class change. In myself, I've become a stronger learner through having to include other sources besides the main text in my writing, which helped apply a deeper understanding. I have learned new ways to analyze reading, especially through looking at author background and history of the text, which was then reinforced by using digital tools as different ways to summarize my analysis of the text. Then as a class, I think we have become better facilitators through our podcasts and open discussions. We became better at working in groups and realizing each other's strengths and how to bring that out in our projects. Then finally, we have become more mindful through our class by just genuinely listening and building off ideas off of each other and becoming better people for that. So thank you.